Right, this tutorial is going to be about text, and it's very simple and should be short and sweet. So the default text style will be whatever, once you have your text tool in hand and you change whatever this is on the Design Central, every aspect from your tracking to your spacing to size, angle, etc., and the font type will become default. So if you open up your app and it's set at Arial or something like that, you can go ahead and just change it to something like this in a reasonable font size, such as 4 inches. All right, I showed you this before, but if you double click on it, it gives you these control tools. So you can change your tracking by pulling on that double arrow, tighten it up, bring it up, however you want, reset it to 0 here. You can do individual ones by clicking the little nodes between them. It says move character. And the effect is a little different depending on how your font paragraph style is. So if it's under center like this, excuse me. So if it's at it's a justified left, and you do these things, it'll go to the right. But if it's set to center, let's see what happens. It might split the difference. Yeah, they spread apart. So they spread apart, which you know, it's okay if that's what you intend, but just keep that in mind. That this makes a difference. The justification or centering. So I'm going to reset that back to 0 here. All right. So in Flexi, just like in Illustrator, you can change your text. So if you bring in some copy and it was all lowercase, or if it had capitalization and you want it all caps, so there is the case change under text and case, and then you can change it to sentence text, and then you can change it to uppercase, etc. So that's that. Next would be, let's see, break apart. Don't need that. None of this. Okay, let's just do quick outlines. It's the same thing as the outline tutorial. You're just going to add an outline, and you can change the color. In here, you can do multiples. You can do one. That was a multiple. That was the gap, the gap between them. So let's say you did one, and then you wanted a thicker outside one. You can stack it. So to one like 0.25, and make it a different color so you can see it. Something besides that other. There we go. Brick red. Hit enter. All right, and now you've got this cool effect. You could even add a drop shadow should you want to. Let's do a soft shadow. We'll do transparent. Change that color to black so we can see it. Go to options, and you play with these things. So 100% blur, blur radius. Depends on the size of the object before you do the drop shadow. So I'm going to remove that drop shadow. I'm going to reduce the size of this whole text box, and then do the drop shadow. I can do that. Shadow, options, and apply. Let me change the options of that. Options. Let's go with like 100% opacity. Okay, versus this one at 100% opacity. So you can kind of see the, let me just change them to the same, I don't know, height, width or something, a little bigger. You can see the difference. So the values have, even though the values are the same, that because of the scale of the object, it limits the style of drop shadow. So you kind of have to work around that. This drop shadow is not the greatest utility, but it is what it is. It is dynamic. So for instance, if you hit the find and replace, which is under text, find and replace, F3, you can say text and replace with John Smith and then hit replace all and say okay, done. And of course it's running into each other because John Smith's law. So there it is. So you don't have to, if you're setting up a job that like a jersey or something, or that you have a bunch of names you got to change, and this is a great way to eliminate some of the work. Let's see, I am going to put this up here and duplicate it and remove the effects. So I'm going to clear the effects, clear the effects, clear the effects, back just to regular old type. And so some other things that you can do with it as well are, for instance, this tool as well. You can do varying stripes and gaps, and maybe add some more, give a little more flow, like so. And let's see, if we, suppose we could take this down here and replace it with that, the back. See what happens. I'm not sure if it's going to line itself up. Not too bad. It's not perfect, but we could do that if we had duplicated this and removed the effect and then centered them on each other. Let's see if we've got one way or the other. There we go. So it's perfectly centered now. And then if you took the gray and you did your outlines on top of that, 0.125, and then another outline stacked on top of it, 0.25, boom. Oops, let's change that to something like that. There we go. And the same thing is that you want to change, we'll just say John and change it to Tim and then replace all. So there you go. So you can see there's the sky's the limit with what you can do, stacking of fonts and effects together. What else can you do? I don't know that there's anything else except for when you have a number. Let me do this example. Let's call it 35 is the number. Change that to black so we can see it. Okay. Some kind of rules for laying out a number plate. Let me grab a number plate because that'll go a long way, I think, for illustrating this. Let me just go, I think I'm in backgrounds. Yes, backgrounds. Let's go with a KTM, which is a hard one. Why not? Let's go with the hard ones. Standard. And I'll grab this one. Actually, let's grab this one and this one. Okay, paste it in. So let's say that we've got this number. We'll just use the number that's in there already. The 0, 0. And call it 35. Oh, that was weird. Oh, because the X. That makes sense. Fat fingers. Let's get rid of the X. And let's get rid of this. So the first thing I see with this font is it's a font that we use, but it looks too narrow. It looks too spread apart. So I would take the width of it, and on a front plate, if we can get 125, that's pretty good. And then just change the tracking to something like that. So a much tighter usage of that. So that way we have less white space between it. It looks cleaner if I take this and go like that. And in fact, this is constraining it to the white space. So we'll do a couple variations here. Let me just put this back to 0. Oops. I think auto save is getting me right now. So let me change that to 0 and change this back to 100. So same height number, you can see the difference. So they look drastically different. Now, more of a Moto style would be to get that number a little bit bigger. And depending on the style of the artwork that's based behind, we do a couple things. Suppose I should just take this, duplicate that, and just change the that back to 0. Okay. So a couple things that you could do is you could, one, contain it to like a fuse, or two, you could do an outline of white, and usually I do like a 0.2, depends on how it looks with what it's trying to balance. Hit that and then do, say, white, and let it do that. Now it's still going to get cut by the contour cut. You can see the numbers getting trimmed and stuff. So it depends on what you think looks better. I personally actually like the one on the left, but it's hard to say. It's a safe bet to go with this. It just, if the numbers begins to look too small, customer may complain. It may look like there's just too much white space, but I would say that this one and this one are probably acceptable. This looks like an amateur. This looks like someone didn't know what the hell they were doing. So it's just going to take some time to understand balance, but there's obviously way too much white space going on here. The number looks anorexic. And so moving on, there's this problem. When we have a side panel and an air box combination, such as this bike, if we go to here, let's see, you can find the right side. There we go. You can see it. Let me copy that and bring it in, and you can see what's going on here. That number plate background is really small in comparison to the left side. The left side has a lot more real estate, and I didn't bring the left side in, but you go back to here, and you can see that the left side doesn't have that big break in the middle. So essentially, we've created a template that emulates, the shape of both sides. So if I had the other side panel template, it would look very similar shape. And so unfortunately, sometimes the number crosses over, such as this one does. So let me bring that 35 in, and I'll take the 125%, and then I will rotate it to match, not just sit here like that, because that looks silly. You can see that if I just move this over under there, that angle looks lame. So usually it's either if there's just a solid white background, it would be you go with, just for rule of thumb, go with the angle of the seat. That typically is the least offensive way of doing it. It's just to match that angle. If there's no angle of a seat to match, then I go with the predominant artwork, which is that orange inner line. And this right here is actually acceptable. We could, on the side panel, I'd probably trap it in the white if I wanted oversized, but we could just reduce down the number size just enough so that we're contained here and up in the left corner here. And then we have a background here that we were able to change the color to. So if the customer asks for a red background, there it is, red. We'll go with the white one, but we can't print the proximity of these two objects together are too close to each other to cut through. Sometimes they'll be so close they're overlapping. So we have to be able to break them apart and nest them individually. That means we have to duplicate the number and center it back over itself using Control-5, or I've hotkeyed the mouse. Or you can use, if you really want to be slow and inefficient, use the toolbars at the top. And then take the background, take the foreground number, and do the fuse, Alt F, and do the same thing for the other number. So if I pull this away, you'll see that we fused one. Now we're going to fuse the other. So there we go. So I've contained, duplicate them so you can see, I've contained these numbers in something that we can now rotate freely as a grouping. And it's non-destructive. So if the customer wanted to change the number from 35 to 53, replace all. So there may be some instances where you have to go back and modify it. In this case, if it was just a quick number change, I'd be fine with that. That's fine. If it was already nested and everything, all it was a number change. Very simple, just to find and replace. That works for this font, this impact font. It doesn't work so well for the other fonts, but you get the picture. All right, so, and just to keep showing you the actual process that we created. Let me see if it makes the back. Whoops. Is to group those together. Now there would be a Dirtdigits logo somewhere in there. And then I would duplicate over here and then do a nest. Just break them apart and get ready to nest for the work. And sometimes it is that you get, it's just the proximity. Sometimes you get them in the same exact location that works best. Could work, or it could go down here. You could flip it around, and then you could have a front plate that can go up in that direction over here. There it is. So let's see if there anything else about fonts. Other than going to using the word, what's it called? Word mark. So this is a word mark. You just type wordmark.it and you can enter in whatever it is, and it shows your system fonts. So that's important. And I will get you all my fonts as well. I'll load them up on the server. We can transfer them over to you or send you a WeTransfer and then load up those fonts so that you're not worrying about fonts being replaced when you open up a job. Let's see. Number plates. Depends. There's no real hard, fast rule about which side when you have a hole in the middle. Typically, though, I would put the name over here if it's split. The only reason I would not do it in this case is because if you were to look at that front number plate, and this is experience, we go back to 21 DSXF. Let's see if I can find a front number plate image, and it would make sense to you once you see it. Here we go. Is that a clear enough one? Do that one. That's not very clear. It's hard to see. How big is that? 1200. Oh, let's copy it and see what happens. Yeah, you can kind of see it. That right about here is a change in the angle. So you can't really see that just looking at the front plate. I can draw it. So it's something like that there's an angle. So you can see if I put the first last name right there, although it looks like there's plenty enough space to do it, it's going to contort right at this angle. So on this bike we use it over here on that flat spot. Or if you wanted to return a line and let's say change the alignment to the left and then change the spacing by moving either that little crosshair or the triple arrow or double arrow thing, and then move it over. And what I would typically do is take the first name and change the font size or even the font itself, like so, and maybe scale down like that, and maybe actually even make it straight up and down. But this one, if I do it straight up and down, it will look funny. So whenever there's a taper, and by taper I mean something like this, a wedge, which we kind of have going on right here, it's wider at this point than it is at this point. It's choking down, is I split the difference. And by splitting the difference, I just mean you take a line, imaginary line, and you draw between, like so. And that would be my angle of the name. So this is more or less, it's not exact science, but it's more or less taking this and making a taper, splitting the difference. So there's that. And if there's a name that requests for the side panel, just duplicate this. Oops, copy paste, make it into a color that one can see, and put it in a place that is visible but not super hidden. This one is borderline. You can see that it will wrap underneath there. So you might move it either in the number plate section or put it in the beginning over here. You just have to balance it with what is available on the left side so it looks mirrored. So whatever you do on one side, make sure you do it on the other side. I think that wraps up fonts.